Welcome back, you night owls. Tonight we drift into velvet-draped corridors and echoing marble chambers, where every footstep is silent and every breath a gamble. Here, within the grandeur of Rome's golden age, not all glories glisten by choice. Tonight, we peel back the silk curtains and step softly into the cloistered world of Rome's male concubines. A life shaped not by romance or luxury, but by control, fear, and a daily ritual of survival. And yes, spoiler alert, they probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from, and what time the moon's hanging over your sky. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Rome doesn't smell like power. It smells like oil, sweat, and the metallic sting of blood on bronze. But somewhere behind the colonnades and echoing forums, deep within domus walls padded with gold leaf and silken tapestries, there lies a quieter prison. The chamber of the male concubine. Draped in foreign linens, barefoot on heated marble floors, he waits, not for affection, but for permission. He's dressed carefully, though not by himself. Slaves handle his appearance with precision, cheeks dusted with crushed rose, lips painted slightly darker, the arch of his brows maintained with a sharpened bronze blade. The goal is not beauty as defined by nature, but beauty as owned. His body is hairless, not by youth, but by force, scraped smooth by pumice, and occasionally singed by fire. He is the aesthetic of obedience made flesh. To call him slave misses something vital. He is more than a servant. He is decoration. His very existence is designed to reflect his master's power. When visiting dignitaries wander through a Roman villa and glance upon a reclining boy draped in translucent linen, they are not seeing a person. They are seeing wealth, dominance, and unchecked pleasure. But let's rewind. Because no one is born into this room, every concubine starts somewhere else, far from velvet, far from marble. Sometimes it starts in Gaul, where a boy with sandy hair is captured during a skirmish. Or maybe it's the eastern provinces, where softer skin and darker eyes fetch a higher price. Conquest for Rome isn't just about land, it's about bodies. Every victory brings a fresh harvest of flesh, and among the spoils some faces shine just enough to catch the eye of a centurion, a merchant, or worse, an aristocrat with peculiar tastes. And once you're noticed, you're marked. The boy is pulled from the chain gang and taken aside, not to be whipped or branded, at least not yet, but to be prepared. That's the word the slavers use, prepared. It sounds soft, doesn't it? But preparation means stripping away any defiance, any hint of rebellion or masculinity. The castration debate looms. Some are altered, others merely trained to behave as though their nature has been excised. Historians still argue whether eunuchs were standard in this role or simply preferred. In truth, it probably depended on the master's whim, and whim is a dangerous ruler. In private quarters, training begins. He's taught Latin, but only in fragments. How to say yes, master, please, sir, and forgive me. His old name is erased. A new one is chosen, often Greek-sounding, sweet on the tongue, suitable for moaning softly through clenched teeth. The irony, names like Charis or Eros, evoking love and charm, though there's little of either here. The first time he's presented in a gathering is never announced. One day he's simply led into the triclinium where guests recline on cushioned couches and sip spiced wine. The laughter dips briefly as he enters. All eyes turn to examine the new ornament. There are comments, murmurs, and a few greedy chuckles. Someone makes a joke about taming a wild colt. Laughter returns, as if he isn't standing there, flushed with shame and fear, every breath held tightly in his chest. If he's lucky, he's ignored that first night. If he's unlucky, he's summoned after the final toast. There's an eerie symmetry to his life from that moment onward. Every day begins with bathing, oiling, grooming. Then he waits. That's the hardest part, the waiting. Not knowing if this is the day he'll be paraded again, used, dismissed, or punished simply because someone woke up angry. He must always be silent, always presentable, always docile. To resist is to be replaced, and no one remembers replacements. It's easy to imagine such a boy living lavishly, eating grapes from a silver bowl, reclining on plush couches, sleeping in embroidered linens. But these comforts serve a single purpose, to soften the trap. They don't change the fact that he cannot leave, cannot refuse, and cannot truly be seen. His entire existence is curated to reflect someone else's desire. And yet, in strange little ways, he survives. Sometimes it's a shared glance with another servant. Sometimes it's overhearing a kitchen boy hum an old song from home. These moments don't free him, but they anchor him, keep him from vanishing entirely into the polished mask he's forced to wear. Occasionally, a visitor, perhaps a noble's wife or an aging senator, shows fleeting kindness. A piece of bread, a soft word, a hand brushing his shoulder without intent. It's rare, and it's dangerous, because any attention outside the master's gaze can spark jealousy, leading to punishment, reassignment, or worse. And then there's the paradox of affection. Some masters believe themselves to be in love with their concubines. They whisper sweet things, bestow gifts, even call them darling or beloved. But love, in this dynamic, is a monologue. The boy cannot refuse it. He cannot shape it. He must absorb it like rain on stone, unchanged, unmoved, but slowly eroded over time. Roman poets romanticize these relationships. Ovid, Catullus, even Martial drop hints in their verses of beautiful boys who inspire lust and jealousy. But what the poems don't say is how many of those boys ended up buried in unmarked graves, unnamed and unmourned, their final gift to Rome being a whisper of inspiration for some drunk poet's stanza. Still, there are exceptions that prove the cruelty of the rule. A few boys rise in favour, they become confidants, secret keepers, even political tools. Their closeness to power makes them dangerous, but only briefly. Because in Rome, proximity to power is like leaning too close to the hearth. You might feel warmth, but the flames are always licking. And then there are the nightmares, the things no scroll records. Some say that the Emperor Tiberius kept a private island filled with concubines and strange indulgences. Others whisper of Caligula's moonlit feasts, where boys were dressed as goddesses and paraded like dolls. Historians still argue whether these tales are exaggerated slanders or uncomfortable truths. Either way, they reflect a Rome that was not just decadent but detached, a world where flesh was currency and cruelty, casual. And so, the boy, our boy, continues. He ages, slowly, and with each passing month he becomes less valuable. Not less beautiful, perhaps, but less novel. In a world obsessed with youth and power, even perfection has an expiration date. Eventually, if he's lucky, he's reassigned. To the laundry halls, to kitchen duties, maybe even as a tutor to another concubine in training. If he's unlucky, he disappears. Sometimes at night, the villas fall silent. The moonlight filters through latticed windows, casting soft lines on the stone floors. And in that fragile hush, the boy allows himself to remember. The trees of his homeland, the smell of smoke and wet grass, the sound of his mother's voice. Just for a moment he is not property. He is human. Then the door creaks open, and he stands. It begins far from Rome, always far. Conquest is Rome's heartbeat, and the beat is never silent for long. Legions march east and west, their iron sandals grinding paths into unfamiliar soil. And behind them, a second wave follows. Procurers, traders, speculators. While soldiers take land, these others take lives, especially young ones, especially the beautiful. In the spoils of war, human plunder is as valuable as gold, maybe more so. Rome doesn't merely conquer nations, it absorbs their people, reshapes them, reassigns them. The defeated become builders, cooks, bath attendants, or, if their features align with Roman tastes, concubines. It's a brutal draft with no warnings and no refusals. A 10-year-old boy in Numidia watches Roman standards crest a hill. His parents tell him to stay inside. He doesn't. Hours later, he's bound by the wrists, marched with others. No explanation, no mercy. His name, whatever it was, will not follow him into the empire. These boys are grouped by age, stature, symmetry of face. They're examined like cattle. A good jawline adds value. Straight teeth, wide eyes, and a lack of body hair increase the price. And if the boy is pale-skinned with flaxen hair, a rare gem from the northern provinces, he may bypass hard labour altogether and head straight to a specialised finishing house. This term, finishing house, sounds almost genteel, doesn't it? As though they're preparing him for a cotillion. But here, finishing means breaking. The goal is to make the boy compliant, attractive, and unnaturally poised, to erase the peasant child and replace him with an ornament worthy of patrician company. Inside these stone villas on the empire's outskirts, the process is meticulous. Boys are bathed repeatedly in goat's milk, their skins scrubbed with crushed marble and honey. Their hair is trimmed, curled, dyed if needed. They are force-fed diets designed to keep them slim but not weak. Wine-soaked figs, bits of soft cheese, sweetened dates. They are taught gestures, how to incline their heads when spoken to, how to kneel gracefully, how to avoid eye contact without seeming insolent. A raised eyebrow can mean displeasure. A crooked hem may invite punishment. These boys are turned into walking canvases, not of their culture, but of Roman desire. Trainers, often former concubines themselves, teach survival. The first lesson is always silence. Never speak unless prompted. Never question. Never flinch. The second is posture. Shoulders down, neck long, hands open. The third is harder. Anticipation. Learn to read moods. Is the master in need of comfort, distraction, or complete submission? All the while they are inspected. Buyers come regularly. Senators, merchants, generals, even poets flush with recent success. They stroll through courtyards like farmers at a livestock show. Some lift the boys' chins to examine their faces. Others request private interviews. These are never actual conversations, of course. They are assessments, soft words to check how well the boy obeys. And when the deal is made, the boy is renamed, perfumed and transported. Rome awaits. The journey to the capital is long, jolting and terrifying. Some boys hope they'll be forgotten, others imagine escape. But Rome looms on the horizon like a living beast. Domes rising above fog, the smell of baking bread mixed with sewage, the sound of thousands of voices layered over hooves and hammers. He arrives not as a person, but as property. Paperwork filed, branding optional. His new home is a villa with high walls and laughing fountains. Somewhere within it is the master who purchased him. Possibly a senator with a fondness for Greek epics, or a wealthy widow seeking company. Or worse, a teenager of noble birth playing house with real lives. No matter who the owner is, the role is the same. Be beautiful, be useful, be silent. His quarters are small but ornate. A low bed with embroidered pillows, a water basin trimmed in bronze. The illusion of luxury masks the lack of freedom. He cannot leave without permission. He cannot refuse any request. He cannot speak of the past nor plan for a future. His schedule is not written down, but everyone knows it. Wake before dawn, bathe, anoint, dress, wait. Maybe he's summoned to breakfast. Maybe not. Maybe he's made to sing or recite a verse. Maybe he's ignored for days, then suddenly expected to perform, entertain, soothe. Every moment is a coin toss. He learns to live in a state of preemptive apology. Despite the silence, the villa hums with unspoken hierarchies. The kitchen slaves pity him. The housekeeper despises him. Other concubines, if present, alternate between coldness and camaraderie. They've all learned that favour is fragile. Bonding too deeply means suffering when one of them is sold or disappears. Disappearance in this world is a constant threat. If the boy displeases, refuses to smile, gains too much weight, shows too much fear, he may be returned to the market or demoted to harder labour. Worse, he may simply be handed off to a friend of the master for a weekend, like an exotic appetizer. But there are also dangers in being too pleasing. The more adored a concubine becomes, the more enemies he makes. Jealous household staff may sabotage him. Other favourites may spread rumours, and the master's spouse, if they exist, often views the concubine as a symbol of humiliation. One wrong glance, one mistimed smirk, and the boy could find himself accused of theft, insolence, or worse. Even the master's love is a trap. A favoured boy may be showered with gifts, rings, tunics, even a personal servant. But this attention is conditional. It creates a higher standard he must always meet. Fail once, and the fall is swift and public. One scholar speculates that these boys were occasionally forced to entertain guests at elite Roman banquets, not just by reciting poems or singing, but by being paraded through the room, praised like rare artifacts. It's unclear whether they were abused during these gatherings or simply shown off, but either way the implication is clear. Their value lies not in who they are, but in how others perceive them. Over time, some boys adapt. They learn to manipulate, to fake affection, to flatter, to charm. They become actors in their own captivity. A few even gain influence, whispered advisors to their masters, secret keepers, emotional crutches. But these are rare cases, and usually short-lived, because no matter how clever or beloved a concubine ages, at 16 he is less fresh. At 18 he's nearly invisible. By 20, if he hasn't been freed or reassigned, he's a relic. And Roman society has little use for relics that remind them of past indulgences. Some are quietly discarded, married off to lower status freedwomen, assigned to manage stables, or simply vanished. No ceremony, no thanks. Some do find escape in manumission, a rare act of mercy in which a master formally frees his slave. This doesn't mean autonomy, not really. Freedmen still owe loyalty, and concubines especially often remain tethered emotionally and financially to their former owners. But compared to the alternative, it's a kind of freedom. And then there's the rebellion no one speaks of, suicide. Though rarely documented, it's not hard to imagine. A boy who sees no exit, no future, and no real past may take matters into his own hands. Slaves were not supposed to own their lives, but sometimes that's the only thing left to claim. One eerie story, part fact, part folklore, tells of a young concubine named Silenus, kept by a noblewoman notorious for her vanity. When he aged out of favour, he was made to serve in her garden, watering roses. He died quietly, face down in a fountain. Whether he slipped or chose to fall remains unrecorded. His name survives in one passing mention by a satirist who calls him the flower who drowned in envy. And yet, even in this bleak world, there are tiny rebellions. Some boys carve initials into stone walls. Others hide small keepsakes in floor cracks, pebbles, feathers, things that remind them of places where they had names. These acts mean nothing to the Empire, but to them, they are everything. They remind us that even in captivity, humanity persists. Even in the tightest cages, the mind can flutter like a moth toward memory. Because every concubine begins as a child. Every child has a story, and every story deserves to be told, even if Rome never wanted to hear it, to. By the time he arrives in the capital, the boy is already a curated product. Every inch of his appearance is designed to spark desire and admiration. His face is smooth, his limbs toned, his eyes large and carefully trained to convey humility. Yet beneath the careful grooming he is terrified, because in Rome, beauty is a liability, a dangerous currency that is taxed by humiliation. He is kept out of sight until the master is ready. He sleeps on linen sheets and eats soft fruits, but comfort is not the same as safety. He is cleaned, oiled, powdered daily. Slaves tend to his appearance with silent detachment, treating him like a living sculpture. He is, after all, more decoration than person now. The first true encounter with the master varies. Sometimes it's casual, a passing look, a nod of acknowledgement, a murmured approval. Other times it's theatrical, with the boy led in during a gathering, presented like a trophy. Guests whisper, drink deeply and smirk. No one speaks to him directly, but everyone stares. He's a conversation piece they pretend not to be talking about, and when the master finally speaks to him, really speaks, it's rarely to ask how he feels. It's to instruct, to critique, to mould. The boy must listen carefully, memorize preferences, internalize rules. What flavour of wine the master prefers, how to hold a cup properly, whether eye contact is acceptable or offensive. One misstep can lead to days of silent punishment or sharp reprimands. Roman society sees this all as normal. The boy is a delicium, a darling, a pet. These terms float through literature and casual speech like rose petals, masking the cruelty with euphemism. To own a beautiful boy is a sign of refinement. To parade him at a feast shows cultural sophistication. No one questions his presence because no one really sees him. Historians point out that male concubines often appear in art not as individuals, but as symbols. In frescoes and mosaics, they recline at the feet of nobility, eyes cast downward, holding musical instruments or trays of fruit. The message is clear: pleasure made passive. But while the upper class pretends sophistication, the concubine lives under constant scrutiny. He must anticipate needs without being asked, respond instantly but never speak first. He becomes an expert in reading moods, deciphering silences. If the master is sullen, He must soothe. If the master is elated, he must mirror that joy no matter how he feels. This emotional labour is invisible but exhausting. The boy is not just a body. He is a sponge, absorbing whims, fears, jealousies. Some masters demand conversation. Others demand absolute quiet. Some are erratic, kind one day, cruel the next. The boy cannot predict which version he'll encounter, so he builds a mask. A smile that stays even when his stomach knots. Behind the scenes, the household reinforces this dynamic. Other slaves observe silently. Some are envious, others pity him. The concubine walks a lonely path, exalted and despised in the same breath. He is not permitted to form friendships easily. Affection among slaves is seen as a threat. If he grows too close to someone, that person might be reassigned or punished just to remind him of the rules. And while the villa is grand, he rarely sees Rome itself. He may hear the clang of the blacksmiths on the Aventine, or the cries of vendors near the Forum, but only through windows. Once in a while he's brought along to public events, banquets, baths, theatre outings. Not for his enjoyment, of course, but to be shown off. The master likes being envied. At the baths things get worse. Roman bathhouses are more than places to get clean. They're theatres of power. Senators, poets, soldiers all mingle half-dressed, exchanging gossip and glances. Bringing a beautiful boy to the baths is a status symbol, akin to showing up with a prize stallion or an exotic bird. People notice, people comment, and always someone wants to touch. The concubine learns to navigate this perilous terrain. He must be visible but not inviting, available but not approachable. If someone touches him without permission, it's his fault for being tempting. If he pulls away, it's his fault for being rude. Every gesture is a trap, and still some moments glimmer with strange humanity. A servant in the kitchen slips him a piece of pomegranate. An older slave teaches him a prayer in whispers. A guest, perhaps, offers a kind word, then glances nervously around as if ashamed to be seen. These crumbs of kindness matter. They remind him he is not entirely invisible. But kindness can also be weaponized. Masters often conflate affection with control. "I treat you well," they say, as if luxury cancels out captivity. They give jewellery, silks, maybe even a small pet, a monkey, a songbird, a cat. These are not gifts. They are anchors. Each one makes it harder to imagine life beyond the villa walls. And then there's the worst danger, becoming a favourite. At first it seems like safety. The master praises him in front of guests, invites him to sit nearby, gives him a nickname. Other slaves step aside when he passes. He's allowed to speak, to advise, to exist more fully. But favourites are fragile. They become targets. Other concubines envy the attention. Staff resent his elevated position. Even the master's friends may whisper poison. "He's becoming too bold," they might say. "You're softening." Paranoia sets in. The higher he rises, the more devastating the fall. One day, a new boy arrives. Blonder, slimmer, younger. Suddenly the master is distracted. The concubine's duties lessen, then vanish. His chambers are moved. His name is spoken less. No explanation, no ceremony, just absence. Some are reassigned to work in storerooms or stables. Others are sold quietly to minor officials. A few are simply dismissed without support, forced to roam the city in tattered finery, seeking protection from strangers, and a rare few vanish entirely, their fates unrecorded. Rome does not remember the beautiful boys it consumed, but we do catch glimpses, in poetry that hints at scandal, in graffiti scrawled on bathhouse walls, in letters from anxious parents who beg senators to protect their sons from unseemly company. Even emperors weren't above this. Suetonius writes that Nero kept a castrated boy named Sporus, whom he dressed as a wife. Whether out of obsession, delusion, or cruelty, no one knows. Historians still argue whether Sporus loved Nero or merely survived him. And then there are artifacts. A gold bracelet inscribed with the word carus, Latin for beloved. A fresco in Pompeii depicting a youth reclining beside a bowl of grapes, his expression unreadable. A wooden comb, worn smooth by anxious fingers. These are the echoes. The lingering sighs of lives once lived, now barely remembered. Not all boys were victims in the same way. Some adapted, manipulated, found agency in shadows. A few became powerful by association, using their closeness to bend politics subtly. But even they were never truly free. Their power was borrowed, not earned. One misstep, and it was gone. So why did Rome permit this system? Because it reflected their values. Pleasure, dominance, spectacle. In a society where men measured status by what they controlled, to own beauty was to assert superiority. The fact that the beauty suffered didn't matter. In fact, it made the display more potent. But beauty fades, and when it does, the boy becomes invisible. Or worse, a reminder. Masters hate reminders. Rome hates mirrors that reflect its own cruelty. And yet, somewhere in the back room of a villa, another boy waits. Freshly arrived, still learning how to kneel correctly, still practicing his soft smile, still believing he might be different. He won't be. The slave market is loud, raucous, almost festive if you didn't know better. Beneath the awnings strung between marble columns, the air buzzes with shouting, laughter, and the rhythmic crack of paddles against display platforms. Here in the heart of Rome's commercial sector, everything is for sale, and every buyer thinks himself a connoisseur. This is where flesh becomes economy. The boy stands on a raised dais, ankle shackled to a bronze loop. Around him, others shift uncomfortably, some older, some younger. A few stare blankly at the horizon, others scan the crowd with the sharp-eyed desperation of those seeking an escape they'll never find. Naked, or nearly so, each is arranged by category. Labourer, cook, domestic, erotic. Guess which line gets the most foot traffic? He's been prepared for days. His teeth whitened with powdered oyster shell, his lips rouged, even his nipples tinted slightly with crushed berries to make them more appealing. His hair has been perfumed and curled into loose, cascading waves, part Greek muse, part captured angel. When he's displayed, the announcer reads his qualities in a practiced tone: age, height, temperament, origin. Docile, they say, though he's not. Trained, though he's barely been taught more than to kneel and remain still. The crowd doesn't care. They murmur appreciatively, calculating his worth with eyes that skim and appraise. He's not human, he's potential, decoration, a future conquest. A senator pauses before him, leans in, lifts the boy's chin with one ringed finger. He mutters, then turns to haggle. It's not about what the boy costs, it's about being seen to win the purchase. Status is the real currency, the boy is just the token. Eventually the deal is struck. A wax tablet is signed, a purse handed over. Chains are removed, wrists rebound with silken cord. The boy is not told where he's going. That's not information he deserves. He's placed into a covered litter and whisked through the streets, his view reduced to shifting shadows and the occasional shaft of sunlight. The villa is palatial. Statues of nymphs and satyrs guard the entrance, their marble faces frozen in eternal mischief. Servants guide him through tiled hallways that echo with every step. The air smells of citrus and burning myrrh. Everything glitters slightly, like a dream or a mirage. He's not brought to his master directly. First he's bathed again, every inch inspected. A physician checks his teeth and joints, notes his muscle tone. A slave with practiced hands rubs oil into his skin while another trims and shapes his nails. When they're done, he's wrapped in a gauzy tunic that clings in all the wrong places and left to wait in a perfumed atrium. Hours pass. He counts the tiles on the floor. He watches a spider thread its way along a column. He tries not to think of home, of faces, smells, places that already feel blurred and insubstantial. Eventually footsteps echo. He stands quickly. The door opens. It's not the master. It's a steward, flanked by two other servants. They examine him again, like checking if the fruit has ripened in transit. One whispers, "He'll do," and the others nod. Papers are filed. Another bath, another waiting room. It's evening when the master finally appears. He's older than expected. Perhaps in his 60s, soft in the jaw but sharp in the eyes. His robe is rich crimson, trimmed in black fur. He says nothing at first, just circles the boy slowly, as though deciding where to start. Eventually he smiles. "So this is the one," he says. "Not you, just this." As if the boy were a tapestry or a particularly well-shaped vase. The master offers no name, no greeting. Instead, he gives instructions. "You'll rise with the sun." You'll be silent at meals unless addressed. You will not leave your quarters unless summoned. Is that clear?" The boy nods. The master waves him away. And so it begins. The room he's assigned is sumptuous in a hollow sort of way. Golden lamps shaped like dolphins. Cushions so soft they sink beneath a finger's weight. A small fountain trickles in the corner, its water-tinted pink with the rose petals. It would be paradise, if not for the locked door. Each morning follows the same pattern. A knock before dawn, bath, anointing, tunic, silence. He eats in his room, sweet wine, soft bread, hard-boiled quail eggs. Then he waits, always waiting, listening for footsteps, for a summons, for a decision to be made about how he'll spend his day. Sometimes he's asked to sing, other times to massage the master's shoulders while he dictates letters. Once, he's ordered to stand completely still while guests examine his form, a conversation conducted entirely around him, as though he were a lifeless sculpture. The master is not cruel, not outwardly. He doesn't strike or shout, but he owns the boy absolutely, and his whims are gospel. If he wants silence, silence falls. If he wants laughter, everyone laughs. If he wants a concubine to weep, they must do so artfully. There are others in the household. 2 girls, both older, one from Crete, one from Syria. They do not speak often. One night, the boy hears them whispering through a thin wall. Stories of past owners, of punishments and petty revenges, of nights when the house trembled with fury or desire. They don't warn him directly. They don't need to. He understands. No one lasts forever in a gilded cage. Outside, the world continues. Rome buzzes with markets and festivals, processions and politics. But inside the villa, time stretches and folds, days bleeding into each other like spilled ink. The boy forgets how long he's been there. A month? A season? He begins to notice patterns. The master drinks heavily when the Senate is in session. He becomes more demanding on days following bad news. If the emperor issues a new tax or decree, the villa tenses. If a rival is promoted, the concubines suffer. Everything is performance, not just for guests, but for each other. The boy learns to cry on cue, to blush when touched, to smile even as his stomach twists. These aren't emotions anymore, they're survival mechanisms, and yet sometimes the mask slips. In the stillness of late night, when the lamp flickers low and the walls no longer seem so sharp, the boy lets himself remember. His brother chasing him through fields, his mother's hands, rough from work but warm. The stars above his village, clearer and closer than any painted ceiling. He holds these memories like contraband, hidden behind the practiced blankness of his face. One morning, something shifts. A new concubine arrives. He's younger, maybe 10 or 11. Frightened. Pretty, but underfed. The household changes subtly. The boy sees fewer guests, receives fewer summons. His meals come late. The steward forgets to greet him. He is being replaced. There's no announcement, of course. Just silence. Just a fading. The master still nods at him when they pass, still offers the occasional gift, a ring, a bolt of cloth, but the attention has drifted. The boy's value is no longer in his presence, but in how quietly he can vanish. Soon his quarters are moved. Not to the servant wing, he's not quite discarded, but to a less central part of the villa. He is still dressed, still bathed, but now by junior attendants. He eats with scribes. He is expected to assist with mundane tasks, copying letters, folding linens, counting jars of oil. The decline is not dramatic. It is slow and quiet and absolute, and so he fades. The descent is not marked by a single fall. It's not dramatic. It's not even especially cruel. It's just consistent, a quiet vanishing. The same way a candle doesn't extinguish all at once. It sputters, flickers, gasps for breath, and then finally gives in to the dark. He still wakes before dawn, still washes and dresses, but now no one checks his tunic for wrinkles. No one comments on the tilt of his posture. He's no longer a centrepiece, just furniture, pretty perhaps, forgotten certainly. The villa's rhythm moves on without him. He's occasionally summoned, not for pleasure anymore, but for utility. The master once requests him to read aloud while he bathes. Another time he's asked to accompany a noblewoman on a walk through the garden, like an accessory to a leisurely mood. The boy smiles, bows, and plays the part. But when he returns to his room, now colder, less adorned, He peels off the tunic and stares at his reflection in the polished bronze. He barely recognises the boy who once wept at his first silken robe. Now, he weeps only in his sleep, and even those tears come less often. Other concubines notice. They don't mock him. There's no triumph here, just resignation. Everyone knows it ends this way. The older girls still offer him the occasional nod, the briefest glance of acknowledgement, solidarity among ghosts. And then comes the worst moment of all. He stops being feared. Once, even the steward spoke to him with careful politeness. Even the housekeeper gave him a wide berth, wary of the master's affection for him. Now they pass him in the hall like wind over a stone, unbothered, unseeing. He's no longer a threat. He's no longer anything. He tries not to mind, tries to keep a routine. He folds laundry, helps arrange scrolls. Occasionally, he's asked to recite poetry for guests, but only briefly, only if someone requests a nostalgic touch to their wine-drenched evening. He smiles, he kneels, he performs. There is a kind of safety in this anonymity, a bitter kind. He can breathe without scrutiny. He can watch without being watched. He can observe the strange shifting tides of Roman elite life, the alliances, betrayals, indulgences, all without being swept up in them. He becomes invisible, and invisibility, it turns out, is a kind of armour, but it's also a prison. One day, a visiting merchant recognises him. Years ago, this man had attended a banquet where the boy had been the centrepiece, oiled, garlanded, praised like a god. Now the merchant does a double-take, chuckles, and says something to the master. Didn't he used to be... The master waves it off. Still around, I suppose, he mutters. The boy stands silently in the corner, tray in hand, pretending not to hear, pretending not to care. That night, he lies awake long after the lamp gutter's out. He traces the pattern on the wall with his finger, a design he's seen 1,000 times, never really noticed until now. It's a hunt scene, dogs chasing a stag. The stag leaps, stretches mid-air, frozen in escape, forever pursued, never caught. The metaphor is heavy-handed, sure, but it fits. Weeks pass, seasons blur. The boy, now older than most concubines are allowed to become, wonders what will happen next. He's too seasoned for pity, too passive for jealousy, but he still hopes. Hopes not for affection, but for clarity, for purpose. And then one morning the steward knocks, not gently, not like before, a businesslike rap. "You're being transferred," he says. No explanation. No chance to pack. Transferred. He's loaded into a carriage with no crest, driven through streets he barely remembers. The city feels alien now, louder, harsher. The smell's more pungent. He glimpses children running through alleys, shopkeepers arguing over figs, soldiers laughing at a joke he can't hear. No one looks at him. No one knows who he used to be. He's taken to a different villa, smaller, simpler, owned by a lesser noble. Someone who likely bought him out of convenience, not preference. There's no ceremony here, just instructions. "You'll assist with household matters," says the head servant. "Be useful, be quiet." The boy nods. He's good at nodding. His tasks are menial now, fetching scrolls, arranging flowers, grinding herbs. Sometimes he's asked to entertain visitors, but not intimately. Just to be charming. To provide that delicate flavour of faded beauty, like a wilted blossom placed beside a fresh one. He's not mistreated. Not exactly, but he's not protected either. One guest pinches his cheek too hard. Another makes a crass joke. The master laughs, doesn't intervene. The boy remains composed, but inside something dulls further. One night, during a storm, he climbs to the roof. Just sits there, under the rain, watching the thunder split the sky. For a moment he pretends he's back in his village before the Romans came. He lets the cold soak him. He doesn't cry. There's nothing left to cry out. And still, somehow, he endures. Endurance becomes his rebellion. Every day he survives is a quiet defiance of a system that meant to consume him completely. He learns the names of herbs, learns to write more elegantly, begins copying poetry for the villa's young heir. Ironically, the very kinds of verses that once described boys like him as moonlit muses. And in those words, he finds fragments of something resembling meaning. One poem in particular sticks with him. He smiled, and Rome forgot its rage. He wept, and all the lamps grew dim. The poet meant it as flattery, The boy sees it differently. He reads it as satire, a joke on the absurdity of how fragile power truly is, how easily beauty is used, discarded, and remembered only in embellished verses. Years pass. He grows taller. His face loses its softness. Lines settle in. He's no longer concubine material. He's something else now. An ex-beauty. A cautionary tale. Some in the household don't even realise who he once was. They call him by his assigned name. They ask him for help lifting baskets. They thank him for fixing a broken latch. It's not affection, but it's something close to respect. Closer than he's felt in a long time. And then, one morning, he's summoned again. Not to be sold, not to be punished, to be freed. The new master, more bureaucrat than aristocrat, has decided to manumit him. "You've served your time," the man says, casually over his shoulder. "Useful worker, diligent, good presence." The paperwork is signed. A modest sum is handed over, enough to buy food, maybe rent a room in the Sabura. He's given a tunic without the slave stripe, and just like that, he walks out the villa gates not as a possession, but as a freedman. He expects joy, relief, a sense of liberation. Instead, he feels weightless, untethered. For the first time in his life, no one tells him what to do. No one assigns him a task. No one expects him to smile or bow. And he doesn't quite know who he is without those things. He wanders Rome. The noise is overwhelming. The colour, the chaos, the indifference. He finds work copying texts in a scribe shop. He earns enough to eat, enough to sleep under a roof. It's not glamorous, but it's his. Sometimes, late at night, he walks the streets of the Aventine, passes villas with curtained windows, hears laughter inside, music, soft footsteps. He doesn't need to look. He knows who's in there. Boys like he once was, kneeling, waiting. Sometimes he wants to knock, to say something, anything. But he doesn't. He knows how that story ends. Instead, he keeps walking. He's no longer beautiful, but he is alive. And in Rome, that's a miracle. Golden sunlight streams through the villa's lattice windows, scattering warm patterns across the tiled floor. Birds chirp in the distance, and the scent of crushed lavender wafts from the courtyard fountains. To an outsider, this seems like paradise. Tranquility, elegance, wealth, made tangible. But for the concubine still within, the beauty is a facade. A velvet mask over iron bars. His new quarters are almost too perfect. The bed is low and wide, dressed in imported linens. The walls are painted with delicate frescoes of cherubs and swans. A polished bronze mirror leans beside a cedar chest full of tunics, all sheer, all carefully sized. There's no clutter, no dust, no signs of life. It's less a bedroom and more a display box. He learns quickly that appearances matter more than comfort. Every morning begins with ritual, bathing in perfumed water, application of oil to the limbs, light tinting of the lips and cheeks, brushing the hair until it gleams like obsidian. This process isn't about vanity. It's about control, about preparing him to be palatable. The more luxurious the treatment, the clearer the message. His body is not his own. The master, a powerful member of the equestrian class, visits irregularly, sometimes once a day, sometimes not at all for a week, but his presence is always felt. The staff scurry faster when he's in residence, conversations drop in pitch, and the concubine's posture becomes a little stiffer, his gaze a little lower. The master isn't particularly cruel. He never raises his voice, never strikes. He speaks gently, often addressing the concubine in the third person. He's pleasing today. He looks tired, as if the boy were a statue that happened to blink. Still, the fear doesn't lessen. When the master enters the room, the boy's heart tightens. When he speaks, the boy leans in too far, desperate to catch every word. Approval is a moving target, and failure has consequences. Not always physical, but psychological. A week of silence. A sudden demotion to less ornate quarters. A passing remark at a banquet. He's not as charming as he used to be. And worst of all, indifference. No sound cuts deeper than the absence of footsteps outside the door. During the day, the concubine is kept within a confined section of the villa. He's allowed into the central garden, the bath chambers, and his own room. Nowhere else. A guard, disguised as a servant, always lingers nearby. He's not allowed to wander the atrium, nor step beyond the villa gates. This gilded prison, lovely though it may be, has no exits. The isolation is suffocating. He sees guests arrive and depart, hears laughter and music from behind closed doors, catches glimpses of parties through half-shuttered windows. Sometimes he's summoned to serve wine or entertain with poetry. These are not performances, these are auditions. He's being judged always by people who never speak directly to him. One guest, a senator's wife, once complimented his recitation of Catullus. "Like a little echo of the gods," she murmured. The master smiled faintly, then dismissed the concubine without a word. He was not called again for 10 days. Praise, he learns, can be dangerous. The staff enforce the unspoken rules. The cook, an older Greek woman, rarely looks him in the eye. The steward speaks in clipped Latin, careful never to call him by name. Even the cleaning boys treat him with cold reverence. Half envy, half pity. Everyone knows what he is. No one wants to be him. At night the villa changes. Torches are lit, casting long shadows along the porticos. The air grows heavy with incense. Some nights the master arrives drunk, surrounded by guests. Other nights he comes alone, quiet and melancholy. The concubine is expected to match his mood. Always. On melancholy nights, he's made to sit beside the master and read aloud. Ovid, mostly, or Virgil, if the master feels philosophical. On celebratory nights, he's dressed more elaborately, with gold leaf brushed across his collarbones and rings slipped onto his fingers. He's passed between arms and eyes like a prized wine goblet, smiled at, whispered about, handled delicately, but always returned. These interactions aren't violent, not overtly, but they are consuming. Every touch, every glance chips away a piece of him, not physically, but invisibly, irretrievably. He forgets his own voice, begins to mimic others. He stops dreaming, stops remembering. And yet the most suffocating part isn't the humiliation, it's the uncertainty. One wrong word, one misinterpreted glance, and he could be punished. Or worse, replaced. He sees it happen. A new boy arrives, younger, thinner, paler. He's trained quietly in a neighbouring room. The concubine hears the whispers, "Fresh blood." The master's taste is changing. And though no one says anything, everyone knows. The hierarchy is about to shift. He tries not to panic, tries not to resent the new boy, but envy creeps in, not because the boy is prettier, but because he's hopeful, still believing he's special, still thinking this world will make him more than a vessel. And maybe it will, for a little while. One day, a visiting philosopher, drunk on diluted wine, remarks at a banquet, "The villa's decor changes every season. I see even the ornaments do too." A shallow chuckle follows. The master doesn't laugh. The next morning the concubine's golden robe is taken from his room, replaced with a plainer one. The oil bottle is removed from his shelf. A silent, brutal demotion. He's not sent away. Not yet. But he is shelved. His duties reduced. His presence tolerated rather than desired. A relic of last year's indulgence. He now spends most of his time alone. In the garden, beneath the fig trees, he reads old texts. Not for show, not to impress, but because the words are the only ones that speak to him now. He copies verses into a wax tablet, sometimes translates them into the language of his childhood, a tongue he rarely hears anymore, one he clings to in secret. He begins carving little symbols into the base of the garden bench, marks no one else notices, a silent proof that he was here, that he existed beyond someone's appetite. Sometimes the master still calls for him, not for affection but out of habit. The concubine appears, smiles, listens, plays the role. But inside he is drifting further and further from the boy who arrived full of terror and trembling hope. One evening an old friend of the master visits, a wealthy woman from the provinces. She sees the concubine and pauses. "Still here?" she asks, half surprised. The master only shrugs. "I've grown used to the way he folds my tunics," he replies, barely hiding the mockery. The woman laughs. The concubine does not. Later that night, he sneaks into the colonnade and stares at the stars. The constellations are familiar at least. They haven't changed. He remembers being taught their names by his father, before Rome stole everything else. He whispers their names now, not in Latin, but in the language of his childhood. One by one, Orion, Scorpius, Lyra. and for a fleeting moment he feels whole again. In the early morning, before the master stirs and the villa's marble floors echo with servants' footsteps, there is a sacred silence. It is the 1 hour in which the concubine breathes freely. Just before the sun spills its gold across the tiled courtyard, he lingers near the fountains, barefoot, cool stone beneath him, the soft hush of water soothing the nerves he keeps too tightly strung through the rest of the day. Here, in the hush, he and the others whisper, because the villa's walls have ears and its stones remember everything. There is an art to these exchanges, coded glances, subtle gestures, and speech so quiet it rides the edge of hearing. The concubines, former, fading, or newly arrived, form a loose alliance, not friendship exactly, that's too dangerous, but something adjacent, a kind of careful camaraderie. They pass warnings in riddles. The dog is limping today, might mean the master is angry. The pomegranate split early could suggest a guest's inappropriate attention. One girl, older, perhaps 18, hums a particular tune when danger's close, a melody sharp as flint and soft as velvet. When he hears it, the boy straightens, listens harder, speaks less. The boy learns to carry messages between rooms without paper or ink, a dropped towel here, a folded sash there. He understands that his survival depends not just on obedience, but on the favour of those who know the villa's currents better than he does. And he learns that even silence can be weaponized. There's a boy from Cappadocia, barely 13, who never speaks at all. Not from fear or inability, but from strategy. He listens, always, absorbs, and when he finally chooses to speak, his words are like knives, perfectly placed. The master favours him for now, but the others keep their distance. Too clever, they whisper, too still. The concubine finds these exchanges bittersweet, comforting yet fragile. Every alliance can be undone by a misstep. Every whispered joke could become a scandal. He remembers one boy who laughed at a passing guest. Just once, too loudly. That boy was gone the next day, his room reassigned, his name never mentioned again. Even in the bathhouse, where water masks the walls and steam blurs the senses, the concubines stay alert. They sit close, but never too close. They wash each other's backs, not as affection, but as necessity. Proof of presence. Proof they are still here. He hears stories there, passed like secrets between soapsuds and sighs. One concubine once belonged to a playwright who kept her in a theatre box for years, dressed in silks, made to weep on cue during performances. When she aged, he wrote her a death scene and sent her away with a single coin sewn into her tunic. Another boy claims he once served in the palace, where even the emperor's hounds ate better than the lower-class slaves. Are the stories true? Maybe, maybe not. But truth isn't the point. The stories are warnings, lessons, nightmares dressed as lullabies. And the unspoken lesson is always the same. Never forget your place, even when they smile at you, especially when they smile. Outside the villa, the world churns with its own chaos. Rome is growing again. The markets swell with traders from Parthia and Egypt. The baths buzz with gossip. A new general has returned from Britannia with blood still on his armour and a taste for exotic entertainment. This general, rumour says, has a taste for boys who can dance and sing. Already, whispers float that he'll be hosting a private feast. The villa is abuzz. The master is invited. And of course, he'll bring someone with him. The concubine is called for early that morning. He's dressed in a sky-blue tunic, shoulders bare, gold chains brushing against his collarbone. His eyes are dusted with fine charcoal, lashes darkened to frame the innocence that Rome finds most intoxicating. He's not told what to expect, just be charming. The general's villa is vast and sharp, a parade of marble pillars and tall columns, everything trimmed in silver. Music swells from every chamber, scented oils fog the air, and everywhere there are eyes. Eyes that scan, assess, imagine. The concubine performs. He smiles, pours wine, laughs at carefully chosen moments. When the general compliments his accent, he lowers his gaze just enough to seem flattered, not flirtatious. He's an expert now, a master of the in-between. He survives the evening, barely. As the master's litter carries them home, he leans his head back and closes his eyes. His muscles ache from the posture of elegance. His lips taste like pomegranate and forced compliments. The master says nothing. just nods once in approval before vanishing into his wing of the villa. The next morning, the concubine finds a small pendant on his pillow. Jade, carved in the shape of a dolphin. A gift, a reward, or perhaps a reminder. He tucks it beneath his tunic, says nothing. He knows better than to mistake adornment for affection. Still, in the cracks of the day, he finds little joys. One afternoon, while folding linens, he catches the scent of smoke and cinnamon, reminding him of a festival from his homeland. He doesn't remember the name, just the rhythm of the drums, the way his village lit small fires to chase away the dark. He hums a fragment of the song he once knew. One of the kitchen girls pauses, listening. She hums it back, a single note. They share a glance, that's all. Another night he sneaks a candle into his room, not forbidden, but discouraged. He places it in a bronze dish, lights it, and watches the flame dance. It's the only light he controls. He lets it burn all the way down until the wax pools and hardens, a private rebellion against the villa's clockwork. Even his dreams shift. At first, they were full of home, faces he couldn't reach, voices he couldn't answer. Then came the dreams of escape, running barefoot through alleys, hiding in shadows, leaping into rivers. Now the dreams are quieter. He sees himself older, working in a library, copying scrolls. No chains, no cosmetics, just ink on skin, stories written by hands that once trembled. He doesn't know if this dream is possible, but it's his. One morning, he finds a scrap of parchment left in the atrium, maybe dropped by a careless scribe. It bears a single quote, in Greek. Even the caged bird dreams of sky. He copies it into his tablet, pressing hard enough to leave dents, and still, the routine continues. Bath, oil, tunic, wait. But he is changing quietly. He knows which guests to avoid, which servants to trust, which walls echo too easily. He carves a second hidden message into the base of the garden bench just below the first. I still breathe. Not bold, not defiant, but alive. Power in Rome is never just about position or wealth. It's about presence. Commanding a room, turning heads with a single glance, being whispered about when you exit. And for some, like the concubine, power is a mirage. Close enough to see, but never to touch. Because in this city, pleasure is not private, it's political. He learns this the hard way. The master's sphere of influence is shifting. He's grown bolder in his invitations, aligning himself with senators known for their excesses, men who trade not just favours, but people. The concubine, once kept quietly behind silken doors, is now brought into these orbiting salons, shown off like a prize stallion. The stakes are higher here. Every smirk carries weight. Every comment is a gamble. It starts subtly. At a dinner, the master encourages him to recite a poem, an erotic verse, laced with innuendo. The guests chuckle, their eyes roaming. One offers him a goblet of wine with a wink. The master allows it. Encourages it, even. Later, he's instructed to deliver a letter personally to a magistrate known for his peculiar appetites. The concubine obeys, arrives at the official's villa, kneels, and hands over the scroll. The magistrate's hand lingers too long on his wrist. He smiles. "You read, boy?" The concubine nods. "Then read this to me." The letter is banal, filled with political manoeuvrings and veiled insults, but the magistrate listens closely, watching the concubine's lips more than his words. He returns to the villa shaken. He knows now. He's no longer a secret indulgence. He's a pawn, a signal of favour, a tool for manipulation. He's told to accompany the master to a gathering at the home of Lucius Flaccus, a man with ambitions for the praetorship. The guest list is a web of dangerous men, generals, governors, and the occasional philosopher eager to trade logic for leverage. The concubine is dressed in a new tunic, deep red, embroidered with golden laurel leaves. He is made to serve wine, laugh, linger. The atmosphere drips with tension, not all of it hostile. At one point the master places a possessive hand on the concubine's shoulder, pulling him closer, murmuring, "Stay near." It's not affection. It's branding. In a room full of wolves, the boy is both prize and bait. Later that night, back in the villa, the master seems pleased. He drinks more than usual, reminisces aloud about his younger days. "When I was your age," he says, "I knew my worth." Not everyone can say that. Then he gestures toward the concubine with his cup. "You do know your worth, don't you?" The boy does not answer, because he does, but it is not the kind of worth the master means. In the following weeks his role changes again. He's sent to deliver more messages, asked to linger at more parties. One night he's loaned, temporarily the master says, to a visiting poet from Hispania. "Only for dinner," he assures. The man's lonely. Dinner turns into a performance. The poet is indulgent, obsessed with aesthetics. He has the concubine sit for hours as he sketches him under lamplight. "You're a study in contrast," he says, eyes flickering between cheekbones and collarbone, delicate but unreadable. The concubine keeps still. He's learned the danger of revealing too much. He returns to the villa with a sketch folded under his robe. He doesn't look at it. Later, he burns it. The household shifts in tone. The master becomes more volatile, elated one day, withdrawn the next. Political tensions swirl around him. A vote in the Senate doesn't go his way. A rival is elevated to an honoured position. He grows short-tempered, anxious, and the concubine pays the price. No physical violence, but an increase in demands. Long hours standing silent at banquets, tasks given late in the night, rehearsing speeches, translating scraps of letters, copying verses that the master never actually reads. It's not the work, it's the futility that crushes him. He dreams, more frequently now, of being hunted. Not by soldiers, but by whispers. Gossip with teeth. He wakes sweating, hands clenched in fists. In daylight, rumours circulate. A younger man has caught the master's interest. Not a slave, a free citizen. A theatre actor, bold and clever. The concubine hears the servants whispering. He's spending more nights away. He bought him a ring. He laughs differently now. The concubine does not ask. He already knows. His value is fading, not because he's less beautiful, but because he's too familiar. In a society that worships novelty, longevity is a curse. Then comes the feast, a celebration hosted at the master's villa. Important guests, important politics. The concubine is summoned to oversee the arrangements, ensure the wine is poured just right, that the olives are arranged in pleasing spirals. He does it all perfectly. He knows the stakes. But at the feast, he is barely acknowledged. The actor is there, resplendent, bold. He quotes comedy verses with ease, flirts with senators, toasts loudly. The guests adore him. The master watches with shining eyes. The concubine stands in the corner, hands clasped, a statue in shadow. And yet, it is here, in this moment of invisibility, that he understands something vital. They can only control what they see. He's fading from their notice, and that paradoxically is power. He begins to withdraw, slowly, subtly. He asks for fewer tasks, offers no opinions, accepts silence without flinching. The master, distracted, allows it. The household follows suit. The boy becomes a ghost, but ghosts can move unseen. He listens more carefully, watches the scribes, studies the letters he copies, learns which names carry weight, which seals hold authority. He memorizes routes through the villa, notices who comes and goes, learns to anticipate moods not from words, but from the way the steward tightens his belt, or the way the cook arranges the bread. He becomes a shadow with eyes. One night he slips into the library and finds a map. He studies it, just for a moment, then returns it to its place. He does not run, not yet, but he begins to prepare. Every small act becomes part of his quiet rebellion. He saves bits of bread, a strip of cloth, coins lost beneath a guest's cloak. He carves a third message into the garden bench. I am not theirs. And still, the parties go on. The politics churn. The master rises, then falters. The actor loses favour. The concubine is never brought forward again. Not as a prize, not as a pawn. He is forgotten. But forgetting, he has learned, is its own kind of freedom. And so, he waits. They call him Delicatus, but not out of kindness. The name means dainty, precious, sometimes spoiled. A mockery of softness dressed up as endearment. In whispered tones across Rome's marble corridors and candlelit halls, the story is repeated. A boy so lovely, so favoured, he nearly became emperor's consort. A boy whose beauty turned heads and bent power. But every telling ends the same way, with silence, with vanishing, with speculation. His real name is long gone, worn down like the polished steps of the Palatine. No one remembers the village he came from. No one asks. His entire identity is built around the man he served, an emperor known more for spectacle than strategy, more for his appetites than his governance. And at the height of his reign, the emperor brought this boy, Delicatus, into the palace and called him his favourite. Not his equal, not his partner, his favourite. It begins with an audience. The emperor, still young, hears of a concubine so striking he's whispered about in every villa from Aventine to Caelian. He demands the boy be brought before him. When Delicatus enters the imperial chambers, flanked by torchlight, a hush falls over the gathering. Even seasoned senators lean forward. He is dressed plainly, intentionally so. A soft white tunic, unbelted. No jewellery, no cosmetics. It is a calculated display. His allure needs no embellishment. The emperor studies him for a long time, says nothing. Then, with a flick of the wrist, orders his personal steward to have the boy placed where I might see him again. From that moment, Delicatus lives in the palace. He is moved into a suite near the emperor's quarters. Not in them, never that, but close enough to be summoned by handclap. He eats finer food than he's ever tasted. Drinks wine aged longer than he's been alive. Wears robes embroidered with threads that shimmer like moonlight. But the opulence is ornamental. It disguises the trap. Because nothing is given freely in the imperial court. The emperor delights in performances of power, of beauty, of submission. Delicatus is ordered to learn dances from the east, to sing songs in a dozen dialects. Poets are hired to teach him cadence, philosophers to teach him silence. He must entertain without overshadowing, seduce without suggestion, exist as a constant reflection of the emperor's grandeur. At banquets, he is seated just behind the throne, on a low stool draped in purple cloth. He does not speak unless addressed. He does not eat until everyone else has. When foreign dignitaries visit, he is presented as a symbol, our nation's jewel, one general jokes, half drunk. The emperor only smiles. Delicatus becomes a rumour in sandals. People speak of his mannerisms, how he tilts his head when thinking, how he never blushes. They debate his origins, guess at his lineage. One senator claims he's of royal blood from Syria. Another insists he's a Briton, stolen in battle. All are wrong. All are content with their own versions. And through it all, Delicatus says nothing. Because silence is safer than correction. Not everyone approves. Some members of the imperial family grow resentful. He weakens the emperor, they whisper, distracts him. Others fear the boy's influence. Rumours spread that he advises on state matters, that his voice carries behind closed curtains. It likely doesn't. But in Rome, perception is reality. One advisor suggests sending the boy away for a time. The emperor responds by hosting a feast in Delicatus's honour. The boy is dressed as Cupid, adorned with wings paraded before the court. When he kneels, the emperor rises and kisses his forehead. The gesture is theatrical, possessive. It is also dangerous. Because power, when too tightly grasped, breeds paranoia. Delicatus begins to notice the change slowly. The emperor still calls for him, still dresses him in gold and silk, but his temper flares more often. He snaps when the boy hesitates, laughs coldly when he sings off-key. One night a ring is thrown at his feet. He is thrown at, "Wear it," the emperor sneers, "or return to the gutter where you were found." The next morning Delicatus finds the ring gone, replaced by a plainer one, a message, subtle and cruel. The boy adjusts. He smiles more carefully, chooses his words with greater caution. He learns who in the palace is loyal, who is opportunistic. He trades favours, a kind word here, a shared secret there. Not to rise, just to survive. Still, rumours persist. Some claim the emperor has grown bored. Others say he seeks a new favourite, a girl this time, imported from Alexandria. Delicatus says nothing, watches, waits. Then comes the festival. The emperor, eager to dazzle the city, plans a spectacle. Parades, games, dramatic performances. Delicatus is assigned a role, to appear in a reenactment of the Judgment of Paris, playing the part of Venus. It is both honour and humiliation. He is fitted in translucent garments, adorned with pearls, instructed to glide rather than walk. The crowd roars with approval. The emperor beams. But that night something shifts. The emperor doesn't call for him, nor the next night. By the third day his servants are reassigned. His meals arrive late. His gowns are left unpressed. He is no longer summoned. In the halls people avoid his gaze. He has been erased, not formally, not with decree or punishment, just forgotten, absorbed back into the palace like vapour into air. When he walks the corridors now, guards glance through him. When he enters a room, voices rise to cover the hush that follows. And still, no one tells him why. He spends his days walking the peristyles alone, listening to doves nesting in the eaves. He returns to old scrolls, poems he once read for the emperor, now read to fill the silence. He carves a mark into the base of a potted fig tree, a single line through a circle, his sign, his claim, his reminder. And then, one dawn, a servant knocks. No robes, no gifts, just instructions. Pack lightly, you're leaving today. No reason is given. No destination mentioned. A litter arrives. 2 guards accompany him, not with aggression, but with indifference. He is not exiled. He is dismissed. They take him to a modest villa on the outskirts of Rome. It is clean, quiet, surrounded by fields. A single servant is assigned to him. Food arrives regularly. He is not chained, but he cannot leave. He is not imprisoned. He is stored. A season passes, then another. Birds nest, vines bloom. No messages come. Delicatus stops waiting. He begins tending the garden, reading aloud to himself, writing verses in the dirt with a stick. At night, he watches the stars, names them softly, remembers his youth, remembers the bench in the garden where he once whispered, "I still breathe." He breathes still. One day he walks to the edge of the property. No one stops him. He steps beyond the gate, and Rome is still there, buzzing, bleeding, forgetting. He walks into it, unrecognised, unimportant. A whisper no longer tied to a voice. Scrolls tell strange truths. They tell of Rome's victories, her emperors, her gods. They record the passing of laws, the construction of roads, the births and deaths of powerful men. But the scrolls rarely tell of the boys, especially not the ones whose beauty was bought, whose names were borrowed, whose stories were never meant to be read. And yet fragments survive. Encoded verses, half-burned records, marginal notes. And in those fragments, a shadow emerges, of concubines like Delicatus, of laughter behind latticework, of sighs mistaken for consent, of lives that unfolded entirely behind closed curtains. The historians who preserved Rome's past did not dwell on the fate of the enslaved. They wrote about triumphs and tragedies grand enough to echo through marble halls. They wrote about power, but not its victims, not directly. Still, sometimes in the margins truth leaks through. Take Suetonius, for instance. Gossipy, sharp-tongued, unafraid to scandalise. He mentions boys in passing, a favourite of Tiberius who swam with the emperor in hidden pools, another of Caligula's who was paraded in silks and later vanished without trace. These names are given no depth, no arcs, just flares, bright, momentary, then gone. Other writers cloak their truths in poetry. Martial writes of a boy, more lovely than Narcissus, less free than a shadow. Whether the boy was real or imagined is unclear, but the line speaks volumes, less free than a shadow, a phrase only someone watching from within could have conjured. Even legal records hint at these stories. There are cases where slaves were granted manumission, freedom by decree, but the reasons are vague. Service to the household, one states, another simply says, favoured by the master. Historians still debate whether these boys were concubines rewarded for aging gracefully, or discarded politely after being replaced. And what of the tombs? Some inscriptions, written in Greek or Latin, suggest deeper bonds. One reads, "To my beloved taken too soon, your voice lingers in the garden." No title, no family, just grief etched in stone. Scholars argue whether this was a concubine mourned by a master, or a master mourned by a former concubine who learned to carve. And then there are omissions. Whole decades of court records exist without a single mention of the household boys, though the emperors were known to keep them. This absence isn't accidental, it's curated. To the chroniclers, these boys were too shameful to remember and too dangerous to forget. Even graffiti has something to say. On the walls of Pompeii, preserved in ashen time, someone once scratched, "He loves me like a master." I fear he always will. It could be a joke, it could be prophecy, it could be the only truth that Slave ever wrote. Because love in Rome was rarely free of hierarchy, and yet the myth of the mutual romance between master and concubine persists. A boy, adored, elevated, gifted fine clothes, painted in oils, maybe even buried in a separate tomb. The fantasy is seductive, that some concubines were loved so fiercely they transcended bondage. But the reality is more brittle. A concubine was valuable only so long as he pleased. His survival depended not just on beauty, but on timing, temperament, and the emotional weather of the household. And if the master tired of him, or worse, fell in love with someone new, his status could evaporate overnight. So when ancient texts describe a favourite who grew haughty, or forgot his place, it's not rebellion being described. It's a survival tactic mistaken for arrogance. It's a boy trying to believe in his own worth. Historians today try to reconstruct these lives, but the sources are thin. There are no diaries, no confessions, just the testimonies of those who owned them. And yet, modern readers sense the gaps. They look between the lines of Ovid's verses, the satirical bites of Juvenal, and ask, who was this soft boy mocked in line 32? Who was this singing eunuch laughed off the page? Did he cry when the ink dried? Did he survive? The truth is, probably not. The average concubine did not live long. Disease, abuse, despair. Their lives were brief candles snuffed by indifference, and those who did survive often disappeared into the machinery of Rome, repurposed into service roles, forgotten by the very men who once whispered their names in the dark. But still, traces endure. In a villa near Herculaneum, a fresco was discovered. It depicts a young man reclining on a couch, his expression weary, his eyes turned away. It's unsigned. Scholars don't know if it was a concubine, a servant, or simply a fantasy. But the expression is unmistakable. It is not lust. It is exhaustion. And there, in paint, is the quiet resistance of being seen. Elsewhere, fragments of poetry have been found, scribbled on wax tablets etched into the undersides of furniture. Not formal works, just lines, sentences, emotions captured by hands untrained in metre. One reads, I belong nowhere, yet I sleep everywhere. I am loved, and I am alone. That line could have been written yesterday. It's timeless, universal, it's also haunting. And yet, through all the ambiguity, one thing is clear. Male concubines in Rome were not myth, they were real. Flesh and breath, laughter and pain. History may have tried to erase them, or reduce them to caricatures of decadence, but they lived. They waited in silence. They stared at locked doors. They hummed old songs when no one was listening. And perhaps the most honest record is not in scrolls or stone, but in the walls themselves. Ancient villas carry scars, scratches, symbols hidden behind frescoes, layers of paint that, when peeled back, reveal marks, a name carved into brick, a tally scratched in haste, a plea written so small it takes a magnifying lens to read. Please remember me. It's easy to imagine the concubine who wrote that. His fingers trembling, his breath held as he scratched each letter, not expecting anyone to answer, just hoping someone might read it. And now we do. We read it. We remember. Not their full stories, not their real names, but the truth of their presence, the echo of their existence. Because behind every closed curtain in Rome was a boy who waited, and behind every statue of glory was a shadow, and some shadows never leave. Desire in Rome is currency, and like all currencies, it inflates, deflates, and changes hands rapidly. A boy's beauty isn't just an ornament, it's a bargaining chip, a status symbol, a weapon sharpened by silence. For a concubine, desire can open doors gilded in ivory, but it can also slam them shut with finality. Because once a boy becomes an object of desire, he's no longer a person. He is a commodity, subject to trade, envy, and sudden disinterest. The concubine learns this early. His master isn't just a wealthy man, he's ambitious. Politics runs through his veins like spoiled wine. Every action, every gift, every smile, given or withheld, is calculated. So when he brings the boy to public events, it's never out of affection. It's theatre. The master places the boy beside him like a rare coin, daring others to covet what he owns. And they do. One senator comments, "He's prettier than your rhetoric." Another, with sharper teeth, says, "You'll have to sell him before his bloom fades." Everyone laughs. The boy stands still. Inside, he nods. But these comments aren't just jokes. They're signals, gestures in the courtship of power. If a guest admires the concubine too openly, it's not always because he wants him. It's because he wants what the boy represents. Closeness, favour, leverage. So the boy becomes a tool. Sometimes the master uses him to curry favour, sending him with a note, a gift, a bottle of perfume. Other times he's the silent witness in a private meeting, expected to observe but not speak. And sometimes, more dangerously, he is offered, gently loaned just for an hour or an evening, to please a visiting ally or charm a potential supporter. The concubine never agrees to these arrangements, but then he never disagrees either. Because refusal is not part of the economy. In Rome, slaves don't have the luxury of rejection, especially not beautiful ones. The line between pleasure and transaction vanishes, and soon the boy doesn't even know whether he's being admired or appraised. Even gifts come with barbs. One evening the master presents him with a bracelet of amber beads. "From a senator who admired your performance," he says with a smile. "You've done well." The boy accepts it with a bow, but he doesn't wear it. He places it in a small box under his bed, alongside other trinkets, tokens of affection tied to moments of quiet dread. This is the paradox. The more he is desired, the more he's at risk. A favoured concubine is a dangerous creature, envied by others, scrutinised by household staff, watched by the master's wife if he has one. Even the guests who praise him might later spread rumours, twisting his elegance into arrogance, his silence into scheming. He becomes a chess piece in games he doesn't understand. At a banquet, a visiting noblewoman strokes his hair and says, "He'd be useful in diplomacy." Softens the room, doesn't he? The master laughs, but afterward, the concubine is scolded for being too visible. He hadn't moved, he hadn't spoken, but his face betrayed him. Too calm, too composed. And in Rome, composure is read as ambition. There are other boys in the household too. Some are jealous, others quietly terrified. One, named Tiburnus, begins to mimic the favoured concubine, tilting his head the same way, laughing in the same tone. At first, it's harmless. Then it becomes eerie. He even begins using phrases the older boy whispered once during a quiet walk. The concubine doesn't confront him. He doesn't need to. He knows where this ends. A month later, Tiburnus is reassigned to a coastal estate. The sea air will suit him, the master says. But everyone knows what it means. Desire is volatile. It elevates, it destroys, and the concubine begins to resent it. He stops meeting eyes, stops smiling at guests. He wears simpler tunics, speaks only when prompted. He does not decline tasks, but he performs them without flourish. This careful dulling of his glow buys him time, distance, but it's a tightrope. If he dulls too much, he'll be replaced. If he shines too brightly, he'll be envied. And then comes the Festival of Venus. It's a week-long celebration of love, fertility, and indulgence. The master hosts a gathering, lavish, opulent. The courtyard is filled with rose petals, musicians play lutes, guests arrive wearing garlands and silk. The concubine is dressed in silver, instructed to recite passages from Sappho. He does. But halfway through the poem, a guest, a magistrate, interrupts. "Has he ever been to the Temple of Venus himself?" he asks, smirking. It's a shame to quote love without knowing it. The master laughs. The boy freezes. That night he is summoned to the master's chamber. The room smells of wine and candle wax. The master is not angry. He's reflective. "You're very still these days," he murmurs. "You used to move like flame." The boy says nothing. "Has desire left you?" the master asks. The concubine finally speaks. "It was never mine." A silence stretches. The master nods. "No, I suppose not." Then he waves him away. The next morning a box appears on the boy's bed. Inside, a pair of sandals, a simple tunic, and a sealed note. He is being transferred. This time to the house of a scholar, a friend of the master's, known for his obsession with philosophy and minimalism. The household is quiet. No feasts, no lavish parties. The concubine now copies texts, tends gardens, listens to lectures, and no one touches him. It should feel like freedom. But instead, it feels like aftermath. He is no longer desired. He is no longer feared. He is something in between. But for the first time, he chooses how he walks, when to speak, where to place his gaze. Desire is still currency in Rome, but he is done being currency himself. Now he reads Epictetus, learns of stoicism, learns that some men endure their chains, others step quietly away from them. And one day, when the master isn't looking, he carves a phrase into the base of a stone bench near the orchard. They bought my beauty. They never owned my soul. When the torches flicker low and the last cups of wine have been drained, Rome sleeps, but not everyone. Beneath the hush of midnight, in the folds of marble corridors and behind the walls where laughter once echoed, concubines stir. It is in these hours, after the footsteps have faded and the masks removed, that the true rhythms of their lives emerge. Not grand gestures or tragic monologues, but soft, nearly invisible acts of preservation. The concubine, now older, quieter, moves differently after dark. In daylight he's polished surface, reflective and inert. But at night he walks barefoot through the courtyard, listening to the wind thread itself through the columns. He counts the stars when the clouds permit. He speaks only in whispers, if at all. He is no longer watched, but that doesn't mean he is free. He sleeps alone, in a modest chamber with a thin mattress and a blanket that smells faintly of thyme. A small oil lamp flickers on his windowsill. It gives him just enough light to read or think or trace the shallow carvings he's made along the wooden frame of his bed. Marks that signify passing moons, significant days, thoughts too dangerous to speak aloud. He is not the only one who keeps a secret life after dark. In the kitchens, a scullery boy hums forbidden songs, melodies from a province Rome would rather forget. He hums low, just beneath breath, while cleaning knives. In the laundry room, a girl folds robes with hands that tremble not from cold but memory. Once a concubine herself, now dismissed into quieter service. Her name was Arista, or maybe that was the name given to her. She never says. Sometimes they see one another, the concubine and these others. They nod, nothing more. Solidarity requires no flourish. A glance exchanged under torchlight is worth more than any grand rebellion. These are the hours when the villa belongs to them. No masters, no guests, no performance. Some nights the concubine walks to the edge of the gardens, a place overgrown and mostly forgotten, once vibrant, now neglected. There, among wild rosemary and tangled ivy, he kneels. Not to pray, though the gods know he's asked them for little, but to remember what it feels like to be alone without being afraid. He whispers names he barely remembers, his mother's, her brother's, of friends who may have never existed. He tells them stories, not of Rome, but of smells, of seasons, of silence. He does not cry. He did that years ago. Now his grief is quieter, almost peaceful. This secret ritual is not for defiance. It is for continuity. Because Rome believes these boys vanish when no longer useful. Rome forgets easily, but they do not forget themselves. One evening, during a storm, the lamps in the villa extinguish. A sudden gust, a crack of thunder, and the lights go out. In the dark, the household pauses, unsure, momentarily unmoored, and in that pause, the concubine finds something extraordinary. A moment of genuine stillness. No expectation, no task. He lies on the cool stone floor, arms spread wide, listening to the thunder roll through the hills. The rain taps the tiles like hurried footsteps, and he smiles, not because he's happy, but because he is feeling something. And that, at this stage, is victory. The next morning everything resumes, as if nothing had shifted. But he feels different. He begins to keep a journal, scraps of wax tablets hidden beneath loose floorboards. Not just reflections, but observations. Who visited? What was said? When the steward lied. He is cataloguing not only his life, but the lives of those around him. In his own way, he is becoming a historian. He writes, "The master grows tired faster." He speaks less of politics, more of dreams. Arista walks with a limp now. I think the stairs injured her. The child in the stables sings in Gaulish when he thinks no one hears. It makes the horses calmer. He does not write his own name. He does not give titles. But every entry pulses with purpose, because someday someone may find this, And they will know. We lived. We watched. We remembered. There is danger in writing. If discovered, he could be accused of treason, or worse, mockery. But he no longer fears punishment the way he once did. He knows too much. He's seen too much. Pain, once unfamiliar, becomes a language, and he speaks it fluently now. One night, a girl, a new servant, barely 14, is caught crying near the laundry basin. No one approaches her. No one dares. But the concubine brings her a fig and leaves it by her side. Says nothing, just lets it rest there. She glances up, nods once. That is the extent of their conversation. But it is enough. Because survival in Rome is not always about escape. It is about inheritance, about passing down the knowledge of how to endure when endurance feels impossible. Even the games of the wealthy, the rituals of excess and vanity, they continue on but with less luster. The master grows older. Guests arrive less frequently. Politics shift. A new generation takes hold. The world spins forward, dragging the villa's memory behind it. And still, the concubine writes, he catalogues not just facts, but textures. The way the light lands on broken tiles, the smell of burnt bread at dawn, the sound of footsteps pausing before a door that never opens. These are not historical details, they are truths, intimate, unquestionable, human. He begins to walk farther at night, past the gardens, past the servant quarters, once, even out the gate, just for a moment, just to see. No one stops him. He returns before anyone notices. But the act itself is transformation. He is no longer waiting for permission. He is reclaiming silence as choice. One final night, during another storm, he buries the wax tablets in a sealed jar beneath the roots of a fig tree. He does not expect anyone to find them, but he also knows someone might, and that possibility is enough, because he is no longer just surviving. He is witnessing. He is remembering for all those who were never meant to be remembered. And as the rain falls again, tapping softly against the window pane, he hums a song no one else knows, a lullaby for the forgotten. The public baths of Rome are a paradox. They promise purification, yet they reek of gossip. They offer relaxation, but never privacy. The concubine has been summoned here today, not to bathe, not really, but to be seen. His current master, a mid-level magistrate with an ego far larger than his influence, prefers making impressions where steam and status collide. The baths of Caracalla stretch like a monument to Roman indulgence. Vast halls of steam and marble, domed ceilings painted with fading gods, pools of various temperatures, and most importantly people, hundreds of them, talking, watching, comparing. As the concubine enters, eyes drift. He's dressed in a sheer wrap that barely covers him, sandals clicking softly on the stone. The master's friends chuckle approvingly. Your taste improves with every quarter, one quips. The magistrate grins, puffed with pride. The boy says nothing. That is, after all, the role he's expected to play. Silent, poised, desirable, but untouched by opinion. In the caldarium, steam thickens the air. The concubine sits on a warm stone bench, back straight, expression unreadable. Around him, senators argue quietly over grain shipments. Poets quote their latest verses. Slaves whisper rumours too potent for daylight. And then the graffiti begins. It's not written before his eyes. It already exists, etched into the plastered walls, scrawled with bits of charcoal, scratched in haste or fury. He reads them while feigning boredom. Felix owes everyone and forgets their names. I made love to the steward here. He's cold as marble. Beware the boy from House Vibius. He listens too well. It isn't just petty complaints or crude jokes. Sometimes it's warnings. They watch the beautiful ones. Beware praise that lasts too long. He smiles like a guest, but he wants your master. The concubine memorizes these, not because he believes them all, but because they're real. Someone, like him, carved their fear into permanence. Someone, likely long vanished, still lingers here in these words. He carves nothing. Not yet. But he traces one phrase with his finger. He touched me once. I forgot the name of my mother. Later, in the frigidarium, where the cold water shocks the skin into clarity, the concubine watches another boy, new, delicate, eager, being paraded by a noble. The boy stumbles slightly and the noble laughs cruelly. Grace, boy, you're not in your village anymore. The concubine feels the burn of memory. That was once him, that hesitance, that blind hope. He turns away before the boy sees him, but he cannot escape the whispers. In the changing rooms, 2 men speak of him as if he's not there. I heard he used to belong to a senator. No, he was the emperor's once, wasn't he? Someone told me he sings like Sappho herself. He's been passed around more than a merchant's ledger. They laugh, not viciously, just casually. The way people discuss objects they don't expect to outlive them. The concubine does not flinch, but inside he tallies. This is what his body has become, folklore. Each rib a rumour, each glance a ledger of speculation. Still, not all whispers are cruel. One elderly man approaches as he dries near the fire pits. "You're quiet," he says. "That's wise. Rome forgets quickly, but it listens for mistakes." He nods, unsure if it's advice or a threat. Then comes the graffiti again, on the outer walls this time, facing the sun. These are less cryptic, less ashamed. "He kissed me here. I still taste blood. I was sold in winter. My name is still mine. We are the chorus Rome never hears." The concubine reads these before rejoining his master. The magistrate is laughing with friends, trading stories of conquests, political and otherwise. When he gestures for the boy to follow, the concubine obeys. But his mind lingers on that last phrase. The chorus Rome never hears. It echoes through the rest of the week. Back at the villa, he begins leaving small marks in the margins of wax tablets. Simple phrases, code, really. Green wine, blue eyes, red salt. The 4th step creaks if weightless. Voices travel better when afraid. The steward finds one and assumes it's a joke. "Trying your hand at poetry?" he asks with a sneer. The concubine smiles politely, but he's not writing poems, he's archiving ghosts. At meals, he's still silent, at parties, still polished. But at night, when he roams the villa's edges, he's alert. He listens through doors, hears things not meant for him, a planned marriage, a forged document, a merchant bribing the master for favourable tax notes. He doesn't act on these things, not yet, but he stores them. Because in Rome, knowledge is leverage, and for a concubine, leverage is breath. One morning, while drawing water, he finds a new servant crying near the cistern. A boy, no older than 14, his hands are red from scrubbing marble, his eyes swollen. The concubine approaches, offers no words, just presses a warm cloth into his hands, walks away. Later, the boy leaves a small fruit in the concubine's chamber, a quiet thank you. This is how power passes now, not through gifts or favours, but through witness. The concubine begins to leave messages in places only servants pass. If he touches you, bite gently. They like teeth. The west window is quietest. You can cry there. When they forget your name, write it down. You deserve to remember. He writes them in wax, in dust, in soot on the bottom of amphorae. And in the baths, he finally leaves his own mark. Behind the tepidarium door, beneath the layers of old scratches, he carves, "I was here, I was loved, I was not yours." He leaves it unsigned, but somehow someone replies. A week later, beside it, another message appears. "I saw you. I believed you. I am still here." He doesn't know who wrote it, doesn't need to. What matters is this. They are writing back. The chorus is beginning to hum. Sometimes history hides itself in the cracks, not in the towering temples or the polished busts of emperors, but in the floor mosaics that no one steps on anymore, in the backs of drawers, in faded ink and smudged wax. This is where the remnants of male concubines linger, tucked away, avoided, half erased, yet never quite gone. The villa where the concubine now lives belongs to a man of letters, a scholar, the type of Roman elite who collects knowledge the way others collect goblets or exotic pets. His library spans 3 rooms, shelves packed with scrolls, tablets, wax-bound ledgers. The concubine is not allowed to read freely, but over time he earns trust. Quietly, consistently, with the same patience he learned in darker days. One afternoon, while dusting a shelf, he notices a scroll slightly pulled from the row. A pale ribbon marks its place. He slides it out, glancing quickly around to ensure no one watches. The scroll is older than most, written in a cramped, slanted hand. The title is barely legible. but the first line stuns him. On the lives of the beauties in shadow. He reads quickly, heartbeat loud in his ears. It is not poetry, not satire. It is memory. The author, unknown, writes of boys taken from the East, trained in Lycia, sold in the Forum. He writes of households where the concubines had a separate garden, hidden from the family. He describes the rituals, the expectations, the punishments. He mentions a boy named Leandros, who once sang for senators and was gifted a ring by a general, only to be sold 2 weeks later to a man known for disciplining with silence. The scroll ends abruptly. No conclusion, no name. It's like looking in a mirror that's cracked in all the right places. The concubine returns the scroll carefully, replaces the ribbon, leaves no dust behind. But the story has taken root. He begins to search more deliberately. In the villa's cellar, stacked in clay jars, are fragments of letters, discarded correspondence from decades past. He steals moments at night to examine them. One reads, "I saw the boy again today." His smile was less eager. I think he begins to understand. Another, "She weeps for the loss of her lapdog, yet says nothing of the concubine who vanished last month." And another still, scratched in haste on a tablet used for practice etchings. He sang. They clapped. He bled later. The concubine copies some of these onto his own waxboard. He doesn't know why, exactly, just that he must. In the garden, a mosaic depicts a myth. Apollo chasing Daphne. At first glance, it's beautiful. Lush greens, soft blues, gold leaf still clinging to the god's tunic. But closer inspection reveals something strange. Daphne's face is not fearful, it's weary. Her arms stretch upward, not to escape, but as if surrendering. He asks the gardener, a man who's worked there for decades, about the piece. The old man shrugs. "Wasn't always Daphne," he says. "Used to be someone else. Boy, maybe. They changed it after the old master died." He nods and says nothing, but that night he sits by the mosaic and whispers to it, "I know who you were." Other relics begin to surface. In a drawer in the library, a carved comb with initials that match no known servant. In the servant quarters, a strip of fabric embroidered with a poem that doesn't match any public collection. In a disused storeroom, a sandal, worn thin at the toe, engraved on the sole with a single letter, possibly a name's beginning or the last thing someone wanted remembered. He begins collecting these things. Not physically, he can't afford the risk, but in his memory. Carefully he logs each object, its shape, its texture, its silence. He wonders who they belong to, what became of them. Did they ever walk freely? Did they get to grow old? It becomes his mission. Not revenge, not escape, but preservation. He begins adding to his own hidden archive, not just his thoughts, but theirs, reconstructing them from traces. He writes, "The boy who wore the dolphin pin smiled with one side of his mouth. He feared thunder. The girl who limped wrapped her left foot tighter than the right. The boy in the mosaic has 3 fingers bent inward, like someone who once held a reed too long. He is building them again, not as servants, not as property, but as people." One day, a group of scholars visits the villa. Among them, a young woman who notices the mosaic and studies it with interest. "Unusual posture for Daphne," she murmurs. "Almost looks like—" She stops. The concubine watches her carefully. Later, she walks past him in the hallway. Their eyes meet for only a moment. She says nothing. But he sees the question forming behind her gaze. She almost knows, almost hears them. He wonders if she'll write it down, if her future scrolls will carry their names. The idea makes him tremble, because that is what they were denied, above all else. Story, not luxury, not comfort, but memory, a place in the world's imagination. He walks the halls of the villa now not as a ghost, but as a curator. Every crack in the floor, every faded corner, every forgotten object, he sees them all differently. Not as ruins, but as roots. He walks into the study one morning and sees the scroll again. Beauties in shadow, still untouched, still waiting. He wants to finish it. Add his part, write of his garden, his stars, the night he carved a secret under the bathhouse door. But he doesn't dare. Not yet. Instead, he carves something small beneath the scholar's desk. Out of sight. Just for the future. There were many of us. We did not vanish. We were here. We are still here. Consent in Rome is a mirage. It appears in poetry, flirtatious and flowery. In comedies, it masquerades as clever banter. In sculpture, it is etched into frozen gestures of embrace. But beneath the marble gloss, beneath the honeyed words and silk veils, lies a question no scroll answers cleanly. Could a concubine ever say no? Modern scholars wrestle with this like a riddle half written in a dead tongue. Ancient texts gloss over it. Law codes acknowledge that slaves lack agency, yet court cases suggest moments of sympathy. One scholar argues that male concubines were willing participants in elite households. Another counters sharply, how can someone with no freedom, no voice and no exit participate in anything? The concubine himself has no such debate. His days were shaped by silence. His choices, if they could be called that, were measured in risk, not preference. Smile too little and he's punished. Smile too much and he's presumed eager. Speak and he's impudent. Remain quiet and he's cold. Consent to him is not about wanting. It's about calculating. And in those calculations there is only survival. He remembers his first few nights in Rome. The bathings, the rehearsals, the questions asked not for his opinion, but to gauge obedience. "Do you like it here?" a mistress once asked, her voice syrup-thick. He hesitated, smiled. "Of course." That answer became his mantra. It meant nothing. It meant everything. In a villa with many eyes and no exits, refusal becomes an idea rather than a practice. Even kindness muddies the question. One master gave him a bracelet of lapis lazuli. Another whispered, "You're the only one who understands me." Did those gestures mean affection, possession, or were they apologies for a freedom never offered? The line between tenderness and ownership was never clear. Sometimes it blurred so completely he stopped trying to find it. Later, after his transfer to the scholar's villa, he begins hearing whispers of philosophers who question Rome's values. Stoics who speak of dignity. Epicureans who say pleasure must be mutual to be meaningful. He copies one quote into his wax tablet. "True joy cannot grow in another's shadow." He underlines it twice. But even these thinkers write from safety. They do not speak to boys sold in markets. They do not visit the back halls of the villas. Their wisdom floats above the reach of those who need it most. Still, the concubine clings to the idea. Not of joy, but of choice. He begins to notice moments that look like consent but aren't. A girl in the villa who laughs too loudly when the steward touches her arm. A boy who volunteers to serve wine just to avoid a worse task. A singer who claims to love his master because it earns him extra bread. These are choices, but not freedom. And yet, sometimes, among the wreckage of role and ritual, real consent flickers into view. Small, quiet, rarely spoken. When two concubines share a cloak in the laundry room and nothing passes between them but breath. When a servant offers a stolen fig without being asked. When a smile is given, not performed. These moments, rare as rain in drought, are precious. They remind him that even in captivity, a spark remains. One afternoon, while tending scrolls, he comes across a letter, personal, unfiled, likely forgotten. It's unsigned. A few lines in uneven Latin. I touched his hand, and he did not pull away. I asked nothing. I received everything. It's not dated. There's no context. But the lines strike him like thunder. Because this too is consent, not the false kind extracted by power, but the genuine, mutual kind. The kind that requires no transaction, no stage. He copies the lines into his own archive. Later, he finds himself thinking of one particular master, not cruel, but careless. A man who praised the boy's eyes and claimed to love him, who said, "You're lucky, you know. I could have chosen another." And in saying so, believed himself generous. But generosity isn't consent. It's control with good manners. Even as a freedman, years later, people still assume he chose that life. You were favoured, they say. You were fortunate. He never corrects them. He's too tired, or too polite, or both. Instead, he writes. He writes of the boy who bit his tongue until it bled rather than speak the truth. Of the girl who carved her real name into the underside of a stool. Of the singer who smiled while crying. Of the thousands like them. Unknown, undocumented, undesired the moment their use expired. He writes, Consent is not silence. Consent is not a smile. Consent is not a lack of refusal. Consent is a door opened from both sides. And that door in Rome was rarely built. Modern scholars still argue whether some concubines gained influence. Whether being close to power gave them power. They cite letters, promotions, manumissions. But influence isn't freedom, and a gilded cage is still a cage. He walks the villa gardens now with a different posture. Not just quiet, but aware. He watches how the younger servants carry themselves. He reads the tension in their shoulders. He offers no advice. They must learn as he did. But he listens. That, perhaps, is the greatest act of all. Listening, when no one else does. He passes a young boy one day crying softly behind a fountain wall. He doesn't speak, just sits nearby, offering presents instead of platitude. After a long silence, the boy asks, "Is it always like this?" The concubine waits before answering. "No," he says finally, "only until you remember who you are." The boy doesn't understand yet, but he will, and that, perhaps, is what hope looks like. The erasure begins slowly, not with fire or decree, but with silence. Records fade, names slip off tongues, memories lose their edge. The concubine watches it happen in real time, not just to himself, but to others. The boys who were once whispered about for their beauty, their talent, their charm, gone. Not dead, not missing, just omitted. It begins with household chores. One morning a younger concubine is reassigned to cleaning scroll cases. No announcement, no explanation. The master simply forgets to summon him. By the end of the week he eats with the stewards. By the end of the month his tunic is plain. By the season's end no one remembers what his job used to be. Another boy, once paraded before guests for his recitations, begins to stutter. The steward says he has lost his value. He is sent to the countryside villa. No one visits, no one speaks of him again. The concubine records this in his tablet. He was here. He spoke clearly. He vanished without dawn or shout. He writes in present tense, as if preserving them in this moment might keep them alive. He learns that forgetting isn't accidental, it's curated. When a household changes hands, through inheritance, marriage, or political fall, the new master often orders a refresh. Scrolls are reorganised, art is reassessed, people are reshuffled, and those who don't fit the new vision, concubines especially, are erased with eerie politeness. One morning, the master hosts a visiting senator who inspects the library like a merchant inspecting olives. He lingers over one scroll. This mentions a boy named Adrastus, he says. Who was he? The master shrugs. A singer, long gone. Later, the concubine checks the scroll. Adrastus is mentioned only once. In a single line of verse praising his voice, that's all that remains of a life. One line. No face, no fate. Sometimes the concubine wonders how much of Rome's history has been polished clean of such lives. He thinks of the emperor's court, the boys who dressed like gods, danced like mist, whispered secrets behind tapestries. He remembers a name, long buried, Sporus, once dressed as an empress, paraded, then discarded. Official records call him a curiosity. No record speaks of how he felt. He visits the scholar's library and searches again. Finds no scroll dedicated to Sporus, just a single note in a commentary. Sporus, possibly a eunuch, was beloved for a season. Beloved for a season. Then filed under trivia. This is how erasure works. Not by denial, but by minimization. Even architecture participates. He walks the villa grounds one morning and notices a change. A statue that once depicted a youth in a soft, reclining pose now has a chisel mark through the eyes. The face is scraped smooth, the limbs reshaped, the plaque changed. It no longer reads Boy of Spring. Now it says, Apollo's Messenger. Art modified, identity overwritten. In the kitchen, he overhears the staff talking. They mention a concubine from another household. Used to be the favourite, someone says. Don't know where he went. Another shrugs. Maybe dead, maybe freed. Same thing, isn't it? The concubine says nothing, but the words echo. Same thing, isn't it? To be freed, but forgotten. He thinks of the freedmen in the city, once concubines, once servants, now merchants or scribes or wanderers. Some thrive, Others vanish into Rome's underbelly. No statues for them, no songs, just faded memories, passed in alleyway whispers. He thinks of his own future. Will anyone remember? Not his name. That's long since dissolved into the many masks he's worn. But his self. The way he once traced constellations in the dust. The way he smiled without being told. The way he listened. He starts writing more deliberately. Less poetry, more record. He names names, notes dates, draws floor plans. He creates a secret archive, not just of pain, but of presence. Julianus walked with a limp. He loved almond cakes. Clytemnestra, real name unknown, whistled while she worked, hated plum wine. I saw them. They were here. The world was better with them in it. He knows he won't be remembered for long, but maybe if the scroll survives, someone will see the truth between the lines. Then one day, a younger servant approaches him. She's quiet, always has been, but this time she holds out a piece of parchment. On it, carefully written, "They told me to forget." I didn't. She says nothing, just leaves it in his hand, and suddenly, everything shifts. Because forgetting may be curated, but so is remembering. A resistance grows, not loud, not organised, but real. The quiet kind. A hidden pebble in the shoe of history, a scratched phrase on a wall, a line added to a scroll, a name repeated like a charm. And through these the concubines survive, not in flesh, but in footprint. Time devours most things. Stones crumble, scrolls rot, names wear thin like coins pass through too many hands. But even as Rome ages, certain places still whisper. The corners of villas long abandoned, the cracked tiles of once grand bathhouses, the mural that no one quite remembers painting, all carry echoes. And in those ruins, the concubines still hum. Years have passed. The concubine, no longer a boy, not quite an old man, lives quietly, a servant by name but by practice something else. The scholar who owns the villa has grown to trust him. Not openly, not warmly. But trust is rarely sentimental in Rome. It's practical. He speaks softly to the concubine, asks questions about dates and names, lets him arrange the scrolls, manage the wine, small things, but it is enough. Sometimes, when visitors tour the villa, the concubine watches them pause near a particular mosaic, a garden scene with a reclining youth. They admire the craftsmanship, the light, the colours. No one asks who the boy was. No one wonders what happened to him, but the concubine knows. He remembers the boy who posed for that mosaic. He remembers his laugh, high and nervous. He remembers how the artist touched his face gently, almost reverently, while saying, "Hold still. They'll see you for centuries. And maybe they will, but they'll never know his name." Rome doesn't tell those stories, not on purpose. But in the cracks, in the dust and shadow, it can't help but murmur. One morning, while walking past the ruined estate of a long-dead senator, the concubine stumbles across a fallen column. Nothing unusual, just a pillar, half buried in ivy. But scratched into its base, nearly faded to nothing, is a phrase, "I belong to no one, and yet everyone claimed me." He touches the words, traces them with shaking fingers. He doesn't know who wrote it, but he knows what it means. And slowly he begins to search the city, not for people, but for their traces. He walks through ruined atriums, crumbled villas, finds scraps of clothing sealed in clay, sees figures half faded on villa walls, boys holding lyres, serving wine, their faces too soft to be gods, too detailed to be fiction. One fresco in particular stops him cold. It's in a collapsed villa on the outskirts of the Calian Hill. The walls have mostly fallen, the ceiling open to sky. But on the back wall, spared from rain, remains a single scene. A boy sitting beneath a fig tree writing on a wax tablet. His face is calm, his eyes focused. At his feet, bare, dusty, rest a single sandal and a pile of scrolls. The concubine stares for a long time. He knows that posture, that stillness. He wonders if someone saw him once, long ago, and decided he deserved to be painted, not as a symbol, not as a trophy, but simply as he was. And in that moment, surrounded by ruin, he feels seen. He begins collecting these fragments, not physically, they're too fragile, too sacred, but mentally, a mental map of where the forgotten boys once stood, a private museum of lives erased. He names them, not with their true names, but with the ones they deserve. The boy with the carved lyre, he calls him Calidus, clever. The one offering wine in a mural, Fidelis, faithful. The painted youth reading a scroll by lamplight, Tacitus, quiet. They become real through attention. He adds them to his journal, the one he still writes at night in secret behind the olive press. His handwriting is smaller now, but faster. The words flow. He writes, "Found one today, a face like mine. In fresco, not flesh. Still, he was there. That's enough." He begins training the new boys, not in servitude, but in watching, in remembering. He teaches them how to read mosaics, how to decode the hush in a hallway, how to carve messages in corners no one checks. One asks, why? He says only, because the world forgets what we don't repeat. And so, they repeat. They scratch initials into wood, whisper stories behind curtains, some even begin to write. One, bolder than the rest, scrawls a message onto the wall of the servant latrine. "We are not myths. We are memories. We walk beside you." The master sees it and has it scrubbed, but the concubine is already smiling, because the cleaning is slow and memory clings to cracks. He returns to the ruined bathhouse one evening just as the sun sets. The air is cooler now, the city quieter. The wall still bears his old carving. "I was here. I was loved. I was not yours. Someone has added to it again. You were ours. You still are." He runs his fingers over the letters. He does not weep. That season has passed, but his chest tightens in a way he thought he had forgotten, like a bird remembering the shape of wind. He sits beside the wall, breathes deeply, thinks of the boys from long ago, of Delicatus, of Sporus, of Leandros, of the ones who vanished with no name, no carving, no fresco, of himself. He takes a stylus and writes one final phrase beneath the others. "I will carry us forward." Then he stands and walks back into the city. They say history remembers the bold, the generals, the senators, the emperors whose names are etched into arches and shouted from statues. But the truth is, Rome was carried not just by the famous, but by the silent, by hands that set tables, lips that whispered secrets, eyes that watched and remembered when others chose to forget. The concubine walks through Rome now not as a prisoner, not as property, but as a ghost of all he once was. He is free, technically. No papers bind him. No hand tugs his chin up or forces his smile. But freedom, he knows, is never just about laws. It's about being believed when you speak. It's about being remembered when you're gone. He spends his days transcribing. The scholar he serves now is kind, distant, and distracted. A man who values ink more than people. He trusts the concubine with scrolls too fragile for young scribes, and in doing so gives him something rare. Proximity to permanence. And so, the concubine begins weaving his own records, not as memoir, as ledger, as proof. Each page is hidden inside another, a verse between verses, a note beneath the line, a name buried in a sentence. Leandros was gentle. Arista laughed through storms. Tiburnus copied me until he vanished. We were here, beneath the wine and music. We were the pause before the joke, the hand on the back of the door. He writes them not for Rome. Rome will not want them. He writes for the future, for the girl who sweeps the floor and hums a song no one taught her, for the boy who stares too long at the statue of a youth and wonders why his chest hurts, for the scholar who sees one odd phrase in a scroll and follows it into the dark, because someone must carry them forward. He returns to the mosaic, the boy under the fig tree. Visitors walk past it now, barely glancing, but once a child stopped. "Why is he alone?" the child asked her father. "Probably waiting for someone," the father replied. She nodded, serious. "Then we should wait with him." The concubine, dusting scrolls nearby, smiles. Even now, in fragments, they are finding their way back. In the garden, the fig tree still grows. Each season it sheds, each season it blooms. The roots stretch quietly beneath the villa. The soil carries stories. Beneath it, hidden and sealed in a jar, lies his journal, wax tablets wrapped in cloth, protected, waiting. He does not expect it to be found, but he hopes. He leaves one last entry before sealing the jar. If you're reading this, you already know. You've seen the cracks in the wall. You've heard the silence that shouldn't be there. You felt the chill in rooms full of sunlight. We were here. We were beautiful, we were brave, and we were never yours. He buries it softly, replaces the soil, pats it flat. Then he walks to the city one last time, past the temples, past the markets, past senators who think they own history, and children who don't yet know they're making it. He leaves no final speech, no grand exit. He simply keeps walking. Because memory is movement, and forgetting stops only when someone keeps going, and somewhere, behind a cracked bathhouse wall, or in a scholar's footnote, or in a child's question about a lonely figure in a painting, they survive. Not in flesh, but in whisper, and whisper is enough. And now, listener, let the world slow. We've wandered through palaces and parades, through whispers hidden in marble, and laughter veined with fear. We've met boys who never had a choice, who danced and knelt and vanished before anyone thought to write their names in ink. But you were there. You saw them. You heard their silence. So take a deep breath now. Let it fill your chest. Let it loosen your shoulders. Know that memory isn't just written in stone or scroll, but in the act of listening, in the kindness of being still, of holding space. Outside your window, perhaps the wind rustles a branch, or the hum of distant traffic mimics Rome's never-ending footsteps. Let it drift past, let it fade. Because for all the noise, all the grandeur, it is in the quiet that we begin to remember what matters. These concubines, forgotten by empire, overlooked by history, have for a moment returned. Their shadows stretched beside yours, their breath mingled with the hush of night, and now they sleep again, but not alone. Because now, you know. So rest, dreamer. Let your eyes soften. Let the story settle in the space behind your ribs where truth and tenderness live. Tomorrow we wake, but for now, we remember. Good night.